Okay, so for those of you that don't know, my name is Sharon Palma. I work in admissions and outreach at Keck Graduate Institute, and I have with me the program director with the MSGDA program, Barbara Fortini, Dr. Fortini, who's going to give you a little bit of information, or a lot of it, about her program today. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sharon, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining today. Again, if you could just put a little note in the chat about a tiny bit about yourself and why you're here today, that helps me a lot. Thank you to everyone who's done that so far. I am going to start sharing my screen, and we can start talking about the GDA program. So as Sharon said, I am the program director for the Master of Science in Human Genetics and Genomic Data Analytics. Can everyone see my slides? Great. And this program is now in its third cohort. So we have three groups of students. We have one set of alumni who are already out there making a difference in the genomics industry and clinical genetics. And we have one group ready to graduate and a set of first years who are doing amazing things. And so while I talk to you today about where the program stands right now, I just, if you have any questions of how we've grown and changed in the last few years, I'm happy to talk about that too. Okay, so hopefully you're on this webinar because you're interested in genetics, but there are a lot of aspects of genetics that perhaps aren't well known in popular culture or even just in people who are interested in medicine. But of course, personalized and precision medicine has been a buzzword for a while. And most of the time that is underpinned by genetics and genomics. There is this goal that hopefully there's all this information just sitting in our genome, and if we could only unlock it, we could help patients live better lives. And while some of that is a little bit of hype, a lot of it is actually true. And so if you're really interested in that, we do in our program talk about how to get that information out of the data. Also, another big field is in drug development, using genetics and genomics as the discovery set for the strategy for making new and better pharmaceutical or even gene therapies to treat people with especially rare diseases that have never had treatments in the past. We also, of course, want to develop new genetic and genomic tests. This is a huge booming industry. Not everyone is going to get whole genome sequencing. Not everyone needs whole genome sequencing. So what are the cheaper, faster tests that we can develop and get to market? Then, of course, there's a huge interest in direct-to-consumer genetics. I'm sure everyone knows about 23andMe and Ancestry.com, but there are also lots of niche products. I think the scariest one is called Baby Glimpse. I've heard of this. Has anyone heard of Baby Glimpse? You sequence you and your partner and they like predict what your children are going to look like. So there's lots of interest in using genetics really for entertainment. And that is going to, again, be a huge market in the future. And on the population scale, of course, we want to use big data and these huge data sets to advance the health of the population. So personalized medicine is really about that person of one, that you are your own clinical trial, basically. On the other hand, we want to use this information to help everyone see what generalities we can learn about how the human body works and how health can be supported throughout a lifetime. So that's a huge spectrum of why anyone might be interested in genetics, but you do need the same skills and tools to be successful in these fields. And that is why we developed this program. So we do have a genetic counseling program at KGI, and it was started in the same year. While this program was under development, we thought, well, you know, there's the patient-facing side, but there's also the back end. And that's a real need in the industry. How do you support the clinicians with all of this data analysis that has to be done? And so the MSGDA program was developed from the ground up, sat down with a blank sheet of paper 4 years ago to see what we needed to put in to have a degree that prepared you for jobs 5 years from now. And so we, of course, started with science. You have to have a really strong foundation in human genetics. You have to know how the information works if you want to actually learn something from it. Then we added the bioinformatics piece. So how do you manipulate this data? How do you get into it and actually make some sort of discovery? And of course, we're at KGI, which is a very industry-focused university because we want to put people in positions to be successful, not just on the science side, but also on the industry side. So we have industry skills also to make you successful in making something come to market, because there are a lot of great ideas that have never made it into clinics because they just don't have that industry knowledge to make it happen. And so we wanted to prepare students to work in a variety of settings, either in a clinical genomics lab, a research center, a small biotech startup, or even the big pharmaceutical companies, because all of these settings play a role in the future of medicine. So as I said, we started with that foundational coursework in human genetics. Those are the classes that you would take with the genetic counseling students. And then we added the applied life science courses that KGI is long known for. And then we added that piece of those special courses that are just for the GDA program that really are the technical courses that give you that distinct advantage over other people in the field. In addition to what you learn, the other real key is where and who you learn it with. Because if you're going to be in the clinical genetics industry, you need to know how to talk to genetic counselors, because they're the people talking to the patients. You need to talk to doctors. You need to talk to the marketing and sales people at the company. And so one of the greatest things is that in the different courses, you get to sit next to the genetic counselors for some classes, and you get next to the industry masters of business and science students in a different class. And you see the perspectives that everyone else is bringing to their role, so you can better fit into the site that you end up working at. And so that side-by-side working helps you build your network even before you graduate. And now that we have graduates, it's great to see this in action. I was talking to one of our alums the other day who was in a database updating a record for one gene and saw that one of the genetic counseling students that had been in her graduating class, other program, but same year, was updating a different record because they could see it on the log on the side, and they got to text each other like, oh, are you working on the same thing too? So it was great to know that even though they work in different states now, you still have all these connections already, because it is still a small industry. So you want to know a lot of people. So what's our structure? We have a 21-month program, which is basically 2 academic years plus the summer in between. The first year is mainly didactic coursework. That just means classes. It's a mix of the genetics program courses and the applied life science courses. In the summer, everyone does an internship at either an industry site or a clinical site. And then in the second year, we have the specialty courses and concentrations. So everyone gets to choose a concentration, and you get to pick electives in your second year. And we'll talk about that in just a sec. So here are the courses. They're not quite in order, but they're almost in order. Because we wanted to have this whole wheel to sort of show where you come in and where you exit the program. So we're going to start with lots of basics in genetics, and everyone who applies to the program has to have undergraduate level genetics. And I can tell you, I used to teach undergraduate level genetics. And if you think you know a lot about genetics, it's just the tip of the iceberg. We cover it in the first week of human molecular genetics, and we do the really interesting stuff that you've never heard of. And so we start from that real foundation of human molecular genetics, which is a class I teach, genetic disease mechanisms, which is taught by Dr. Bayless. In the spring, we transition to human genomics. So we have a whole class on just genomics and the genomics mindset versus the genetics mindset. And then in the second semester, we also have the clinical cancer genomics and medical genetics and biochemical genetics. Now, taking medical genetics and biochemical genetics is one of the things that distinguishes GDA graduates from every other bioinformatics program out there. Generally, the only kinds of students that get to take these very specialized clinical courses are doctors and genetic counselors. So by having that knowledge base, you can really say, when you're working in a role at the company, that you understand what's going on in patients, and you now know why you have to design the test that way, because you have this knowledge of what the genetic counselor is going to do when they're doing a full workup on a patient, and what kind of information you need to relate back to the results. So those are the core genetics courses. That's in the first year. We also have those applied life science courses. The first one being the Intro to the Bioscience Industry. That is a marquee course at KGI, taught by the former dean, where you really understand how the biotech industry works. At the same time, we also have sort of a more, not as, I don't know how to say it. We have clinical biostats. I know a lot of people come in with biostats, but at KGI, we do want to sort of transition your thinking on biostats to looking how it works in clinical literature. And again, this is a great course because it serves many different majors at KGI. And so this is one where everyone likes to meet people from different programs. Because there you're going to have, it's a very large course, I wouldn't say several hundred students, but well over 100 students in different sections. But it is your chance to make friends across all of the different programs at KGI. And so while it might sound like a bit of a dry subject, it is one of those courses that students end up actually enjoying quite a bit. Next, we have our transcriptomics class. That is one of our programming courses taught in the language R. So in the first year, we do get you up to speed on some programming languages, so you can do the bioinformatics piece. This class is actually taught also with some of the Masters of Business and Science students and the Masters of Science students who want to know more about bioinformatics. Then we have clinical trial design, papers in applied medicine, our ethics course, which is, of course, again, one of those things shared with many different programs. So you get to hear about ethical considerations from all different angles because you're taking the course with some pharmacy students maybe, and then some business students and some translational biology students. So you can really talk about issues that impact all different points of industry and medicine. And then I'll highlight the last one is the pharmacogenomics and precision medicine course. That one is one of the courses that really brings together all of these concepts and talks about what's going to be done in the future. So that is sort of the base that we use for the pyramid, right? Everyone's going to get that broad knowledge, and you take that information into your summer internship and really start to apply it to a real world problem, 10 weeks. And we'll talk about that in a second. And now in the purple, and purple is my favorite color, so that's why the GDA courses are in purple, we have the specialty courses that are offered for the genetic students in this program only. So we're going to have small enrollments. And don't be scared, but we do have the programming for the bioscience course. It's taught in Python. It's the first semester, but we really want to make sure, even if you've never done any computer programming whatsoever, that we can get you a good foundation, get you up to speed, and then it will definitely set up all of your projects and capstone work and all of that for later years. So that course is taught in the first semester. In the second semester, while we're having human genomics with both the genetic counseling students and our program, we have a next generation sequencing lab at the same time just for GDA. So while we talk about some of the concepts in class, we actually do some of the sequencing and do data analysis in the classroom separately as a lab. For example, today, we're just going to learn how to start using our Linux server. We did a bunch of nanopore sequencing 2 weeks ago. And we did the quality control last week of our data set. And now we're actually going to align it and call structural variants. So today we're going to learn how to access data on a remote server, run command line bioinformatics packages, and then visualize that next week. And so that's one of my favorite classes too, because it's a small group. We get to talk about how this actually works in the real world, how you can do it for free using these bioinformatic packages, or how if you're using it at a clinic, you're going to use a very fancy, very expensive proprietary software package, but the back end of that is doing the exact same thing that you're doing on the server terminal. Next, we have the courses in the second year. And these are really the courses that make our program different from any other master's program out there. The first one is our DNA sequencing and variant analysis. Many of our alums want to go into variant interpretation. And so we have an entire 3-unit full semester course on just how to interpret clinical variants. And that is something that I don't know of any other university that's able to offer a dedicated class on that subject. Most places you get like maybe a weekend workshop or a couple of days. We do a whole semester. At the same time, we also have functional genomics. That's another fall second year course. And that one we are trying to do the cutting edge things that are just research only right now, but maybe in 5 to 10 years or something that is going to be clinically relevant, like polygenic risk scores from GWAS studies. Now, this is not something that's used routinely yet in the clinic, but it's something that's happening in the research world, so we want to talk about it, we want to understand it. So if it becomes something that does make it to the clinic, everyone knows how to do it and what it means. In the spring semester, so right now, our second year courses are genomic data visualization and management. This is another one of our technical courses. It's taught in Python. But once you've gone through all of this data and you know how to manipulate things and do the bioinformatic packages, we have to go back and talk about how you do this in a secure environment, how you visualize the data that you get out, and basically how do you use best practices. Because it's one thing to do it on one file on your computer and everything's named all weird and it's all over in different folders. But if you're going to start doing this as a job, you have to understand how you do clinical computing in a HIPAA compliant environment and how it works when you have thousands of patients' files to keep straight versus just one project that you're working on. And the last is kind of my favorite, which is genomic knowledge translation. It's really a communications course, but it's at the very end. We've filled your head with all kinds of really technical and specific information. And then we're going to send you out to explain all this to people who have no idea what any of this means. They've just kind of read about it in a headline. So it's a class that talks about how to talk to doctors, how to talk to genetic counselors, how to talk to the public, how to talk to a funding agency. So we do a lot of projects in that class where you take very specific knowledge that you have gained and translate it to an audience that maybe can't do the data analysis, but needs to know the results and trust the results. So those are the core courses. Everybody in the program takes all of these courses. And so you get very familiar with your cohort because you're going to be with them in every class for every part of your day. But then we do have the electives in the second year. And so our three concentrations, we have our clinical decision support, clinical trial design, and assay development. The other really big chunk of your second year is working on your capstone project. So here, this is just all that information in a very boring table, but it does list the names of the courses. And if you're interested in learning about any of these courses, they are online on our program website. So you can click on the course descriptions and everything. Okay, so I did talk about these concentrations. We did want to have the ability to specialize, because if you remember from my first slide, people can take this degree in a million different directions. And so by the second year, hopefully you kind of know what direction you want to go in, and you can pick some extra courses from KGI that would help fit and make you a great candidate for getting one of those positions. And so our most popular track is the clinical decision support track. It is the one we envisioned when we first started the program. And those are people who want to work in the clinical genetics industry, perhaps as a variant interpretation scientist. And so you can see the list of courses that would match up with that degree. One of the most popular is the Human Embryology and Prenatal Diagnosis course. That is a course taught for the first year genetic counseling students, but our second year GDA students can take it as an elective. And if you want to know what happens in disease, you should know how to make a human from an embryo up. So it's a very useful course for kind of understanding all types of human health. We also have a lot of students that take the molecular basis of disease course. So that's one of the courses in our Master of Science track that really talks about the molecular side and how just basic biology ends up impacting human health. And then one that's extremely popular is our medical terminology course, because if you're working with patient files, you do have to be able to read all of the phenotype terms and all of the anatomical terms, anything to help you understand what's going on in the patient, because when you do your data analysis, you need to really first link it to the phenotype. And so that course has been very popular. For the more bioinformatics leaning students, the machine learning class has also been quite popular, because a lot of this is not done by hand anymore. We want to learn the rules so we can train the AI algorithm to do it, so you don't have to do it all by hand. And so that has been a good addition to our curriculum. Once we were designing the program, though, of course, we have lots of sponsors in industry. And one of my jobs as program director was to go out and just talk to them and ask, like, what kind of skills do you want in an employee that comes to your company? And one of the things that surprised me the most, but shouldn't have, was our partners at Amgen were like, we need all kinds of genetics people in our clinical trials division right now, because we have the drug discovery side. And so KGI has a long track record of courses in the drug discovery and development sphere. but also just how you manage clinical trials. You don't want to accidentally discover a genetic effect. You want to make sure that you have equal genotypes in both the control and the test group. You want to make sure that if there's an effect of the drug, that it's not just some people that are being affected because of a genetic predisposition. So the amount of genetics that goes into clinical trials right now is actually quite impressive. And so that whole track is designed for the people that really want to work in that biotech startup or even the really established pharmaceutical company, helping to design better tests to understand if a drug is working for some people or others. And so that's, again, a lot of the same classes that have had a long track record in KGI's Applied Life Sciences school. And the last is assay development for those entrepreneurs out there, people who want to make the next great test. Again, KGI has a long history of this entrepreneurship and developing new devices. And so we have a course in genetic engineering that's taught by Dr. Bayless for those who want to make the next great gene therapy. Also the medical diagnostics and in vitro diagnostics. A lot of diagnostics are based on genetic results now. So how do you take something from a concept to actually make it a test that can be sold for patients? And then some of our business operation courses also fit into that. So if you have an idea, is it going to be profitable? Can you actually get it approved by the FDA? Can you get it, does it even need to be approved by the FDA? Can you go direct to consumer? Those are, if you're really interested in that aspect of the industry, we have lots of courses to choose from at KGI. So that's all of the coursework. But again, just as important is the hands-on activities. So we do have the summer internship, and it's followed by a capstone. And so your second year, pretty much half your units are doing your capstone project. That's 18 hours a week that you should be spending on your capstone. And you can do it at either the same site on one project, or you can switch. So it's been about 50-50 what students have chosen to do. We really like it when you start your internship and then can continue that project for the next year, because you absolutely have a jump start on doing your capstone write-up. And that does mean that when you get your 2-year degree, you also have 1 year of experience working at your internship site, which can be quite handy for getting a job. But if you end up that the project can't continue, or you want to switch gears, you heard about something else that's much more interesting, we have the option to have a completely independent second year capstone project. As again, I said, 50-50 on what students end up doing. So I just included the logos of some of the places where our students have done internships. Of course, we're in our second cohort. Our third cohort is out looking for internships now, and I can tell you we have a lot of the same names that are going to be on the screen. We also have some new ones, which are quite interesting. So St. Jude Children's Hospital was one of our first partners. A really interesting project on using sequencing data to find ethnic background to eliminate founder variants from sequencing kids with cancer. LabCorp had a great project trying to integrate long-read sequencing into their clinical pathways. Kylos Genetics is one of our newer partners. They switched gears last year and completely started doing next generation sequencing for COVID. So one of our students got to be very involved with a COVID detection company using NGS, not PCR, which was very cool. Genomenon is one of our long-standing partners. They help support our programs throughout the year with access to some software. But they also had 2 projects last summer for students looking on. So they have a program called Mastermind, which can read literature with an AI algorithm and help you understand what information is in a paper without needing to search for the exact term. And also, if you have a variant, no matter how it was written in the paper, let's say because we have changed nomenclature over the years, that there's a paper from the 80s that talks about the same variant that you're interested in, but it has a different number, right? And so the ability to search literature with more genetics knowledge is kind of their main product, and that helps with variant interpretation. So they were looking at keywords to just decide if a paper would be functional evidence or clinical evidence. There's a lot that really goes into that kind of decision. How do you tell a computer to read a paper and decide if it's clinical or functional? So it was a very interesting project. Evercore Health was looking at data that could be taken out of patient records and used for genetics health management. BioMarin had a great project on using CRISPR for rare disease. Scripps has had many students over the years, wide variety of technical projects. Merck had a pharmacogenomics project, and the NIH was one of their data science and genetics internships. So I just wanted to throw out some of the capstone project titles from last year. These are the types of research that students are doing. Perhaps you are looking at a lot of these words and don't even know what they mean at this point. But I do want to say that we get you there. That's one of the great things about the GDA program is everyone comes in having just some introduction to genetics, maybe from even the undergraduate level, multi-organism, and we start immediately on the clinical genetics, and then we can do these projects that are really interesting. So the ones in red are students who have gone on to careers in variant interpretation. So they're working in that job now. So one of them, the CEBPA mutation phasing using PacBio circular consensus sequencing data, that was done at LabCorp. And so that was a cancer genetics project. The case study, reanalyzing existing exome sequencing data, exploring perspectives on current practices and reanalysis. Again, that's if you have a genetic test, we learn a lot of information every day. So if someone had no way to diagnose you a year ago, should we rerun your whole genome? You know, that's a good question, but we can't rerun every piece of data every 6 months or every computer in the United States would crash, right? So her project is really talking about when do you resequence and reanalyze without resequencing. And so actually the student, as part of her pro bono work with Rare Genomics Institute, was able to provide a diagnosis to a person that had been undiagnosed for many years. Well, a potential diagnosis that was then forwarded to their doctor. And then predicting causal variants encoded in genome by incorporation of artificial intelligence software for rapid analysis, interpretation, and classification of pediatric rare diseases. This was a great project by one of our students who ended up working in pediatric rare disease. Definitely translated that to her position today. And you know, we want to compare all the different AI algorithms out there to make our jobs easier so we can go faster and we can treat more patients. Because this can't be something that takes weeks and weeks per patient, or it's never going to come to become standard of care. So the ones that you see in sort of the purple color, those were the titles of capstone projects from students who have gone actually directly into patient care. So the RNA sequencing analysis to elucidate gene expression profile of quiescent phenotype in cancer. The student who did that project actually got accepted to medical school, so she will be a doctor. And I love that story because I think we need more doctors that understand genetics, that actually understand genetics, and understand the data, and understand what they're reading when they get that patient report. I will scare you, most medical schools, even today, only teach 4 to 6 weeks of genetics. At the last board exam, there were no questions. Well, there were questions involved in genetics, but all of the answers were distractors. So genetics was never the right answer in the board exam. So not that we don't love doctors, but they're not getting this education. So I love that we have someone who has a lot of genetics now going into medicine. And the ethical ethnicity identification of genomic data for underrepresented populations. Student who did that is working to become a nurse practitioner because a lot of nurse practitioners specialize in genetics and actually do quite a lot of direct patient care, especially with children with rare diseases. And then the ones in blue are our students that have gone the more technical route. So the natural language processing of digital medical records to isolate phenotype search terms. For fever, that was a student, Eric, who decided that he really wanted to work in industry. He works at Helix now. He's probably one of those students who came in with a lot of coding knowledge. So he already knew a lot of computer science, and adding on this genetic knowledge really let him get super ahead of his competition for jobs because he can do both sides, right? He can really code and he understands the data that he's manipulating. And the imputing genotypes, Minimac4 versus autoencoder, same thing. One of our students who's very focused on industry and is doing several different things, maybe even doing a startup. So entrepreneurship is always fostered at KGI. All right, so we talked about, alluded to a few career options. But with this degree, you can work as a clinical variant scientist or a variant curator. There's 2 ways you can sort of get into this role. The first is at companies. like Fulgent and Invitae and Council and Color. These are the genetic testing companies that offer interpretation as a service. That's an add-on. The other is for large hospitals that do things in-house. So Rady Children's Hospital, Nationwide Children's Hospital, CHLA, they all also have their own teams because they have their own sequencing labs. So both situations employ variant interpretation scientists. Now, before COVID, the best thing about this was often a remote job, because we've all learned that almost every job can be a remote job in science this year, but it has historically been a very flexible job. So some of my colleagues who work in this industry, they live in Texas and they work for a company in California, or they've moved around several times because of their spouse's job. And it's not a problem because it's always been a remote job. It will always be a remote job. So if you like that flexible schedule, it's not likely to revert back to being in person anytime soon. And so these, you just get patient files every day, information on their phenotypes, information on why the test was ordered, and their sequencing results, and you try to come up with an explanation for what is seen. The genomic data analyst is a little bit different in that you might work for a research group or a hospital, so you're not necessarily working on one patient, but maybe you work in a, let's say, a hereditary diabetes clinic. So you would be working on patient population groups, trying to understand the science behind what is going on with maybe a doctor or a PhD who's doing some sort of study on that group. You also have the same type of job in the biotech pharma industry, where you've been working with these big data sets, trying to find new phenomenon that they can target with drugs or helping to manage a clinical trial or something like that. And then the last place you might be doing is just as a support role at one of the sequencing companies. So there are big companies that do lots of the sequencing out there. So places like QIAGEN, you might know about their little kits, but they also have a huge genotyping and genomic sequencing service. GeneWiz, same thing, Illumina. And so all of these companies always want to add on the analysis because that's where they make lots of money. There's a race to zero, to make sequencing as cheap as possible. So they make their money by selling the add-on analysis services. And I've always thought that job might be very interesting because one day you could be working on, a human disease patient. The next day you could be working on perhaps a COVID test, then you could be working on something else. So if you're the person who likes to always work on a bunch of different projects, I think this would be a pretty interesting job to have because you'd always be getting something new every day. If you do like to work in a small group setting, there's definitely jobs out there for working as a research scientist in an academic lab. And so all of these skills are the underpinning of all of molecular biology right now. And people like me who were trained as PhDs didn't learn it when we were students. So we have to hire someone that can do it for us. And so just if you're interested in a specific disease state or a specific pathway even, if you're really into transcription factors, whatever the case may be, there are research groups that could use the help of a scientist who can both analyze the data and to help interpret the data. And then of course, the emerging careers are the ones that are the big question mark, like what is going to be the industry in 5 years? Everything is changing so fast, who knows? But there are lots of genetic ancestry companies and these direct to consumer, interesting new ideas. They definitely need scientists to help them design their products. There's also a big group of people trying to do the health and wellness consulting. So not being so disease focused, and we have been disease focused for a long time, but instead being health focused. What are the markers of a healthy person? What can you do to keep your genome healthy and not changing over time? And then of course, there's also the add-on services for people who have gotten 23andMe or are not happy with the interpretation of the results. If you have the raw data, can you make new add-on products that are sold to that group of individuals? So there's lots of career options out there. I think the real thing is just matching up interest with the skills that are needed to be successful. I just wanted to highlight a few of our student success stories. So Vidiana Murillo was one of our first cohort, and for her internship, she was one of 16 people that was the recipient of the first time that NIH had their graduate data science summer program. She was the only student selected from California. And so she got to spend her internship in Bethesda at the NIH and had a fantastic time meeting lots of people that were involved in the NHGRI, the Human Genome Project, just lots of cool people. We also have our alumni out there working. And so BD works in interpretation also, but we have a clinical variant analyst too at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. So one of our other students also went to the clinical situation. Then we have another person doing basically the same job, slightly different title, at Natera in their health division. So she's working on the industry side. So samples get sent to her, but she's working in women's health, which was a very strong interest of hers. All right, so I've been talking for 37 minutes now, and I'll open the floor to questions in just a couple. But who should apply? Well, everyone should apply. But if you're a biology major and you're interested in clinical genomics, also if you're a computer science major, then you want to get into healthcare. I mean, this is a great program to get you up to speed on the science side. Also biostats majors who are interested in using these kind of skills for personalized medicine. And of course, anyone who wants to use genetics and genomics to help people. So we have our admissions through PharmGrad. We do rolling admissions in this program. So I know some of you said in the chat that you are also thinking of applying to the genetic counseling. So we don't have a match system. We don't have a date where you have to have your application in. We do start considering applications as soon as they are received and complete, and we continue accepting until the class is full. We are still accepting applications for the fall of 2021. We do want you to apply early because we do have some scholarships, so the scholarships go fast. So do apply early to be considered for all of our potential scholarships, but we still do have some available. And the outcome of your application is you could be accepted, put on the wait list. Because we do rolling, we do have a wait list, or we could deny. And we do have the ability to take international students. So that is a little bit different than some of our programs. So if you are interested, if you're an international applicant, definitely reach out to the admissions team and they can help you with all of that paperwork. Okay. All right, and the last thing I want to talk about is if you want to know more and you're not quite sure this is what you want to do, we do have a summer program. This is our second year of the summer program, and it's the Clinical Genetics and Bioinformatics summer program. We're going to do it twice. It's 1 week, and it's free, and it's a very intense program where we introduce you to some of the genetic counseling side, but also a lot of the data analytics side. So if you're interested in anything clinical genetics, genomics related, we will cover it in at least one of the days. So the application for that is also still open, and I think it's a very nominal application fee. And if you're selected, it is free to attend. But we do hands-on skills. We do lots of sort of simulation, patient interaction. I think it was a really fun week. So reach out if you want any more information about that. And I think that was my last slide. So I will open the floor for questions.
Hi, Dr. Fortini, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Alex or Alexandra, and I wanted to ask you, within the last few years of this program, what are you most proud of about the program?
My first instinct is that we pulled it off. It's interesting. It's getting a new program off the ground takes a lot. When I took this job, I don't think I understood what was going to be involved, probably better that I didn't. But it's been so exciting building something from the ground up. And I myself hate doing things because it's the way it's always been done. So I don't teach any of my classes based on what I learned as a student. I'm old now. I should not be learning this. I should not be teaching the same thing that people were talking about, when I was a student. And so I'm most proud of the fact that all of our courses were reimagined basically from a blank sheet of paper very recently, and really looking towards the future, not what was important 10 years ago, but what's going to be important 10 years from now, and what we need to train our students for to be very successful in this new reality. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to not talk about something that they found interesting when they were a student, but we really do have to be very focused on always keeping all of our students up to date and clinically relevant. I think, next year will be our 4th year of teaching each of these first year classes. And I know I teach the molecular genetics, human genomics series. And I've already decided I'm redoing all my lectures, because even just 3 years later, I'm like, I need to change this, I need to change that. And don't need to emphasize this, I need to emphasize that more. And so I think that's what I am proud of the most, is that we are building a program that is like extremely timely. And we're not afraid to talk about something that might not pan out, right? There are some things we're doing that are a hot research topic and they're not going to work, but it's okay, because you need to talk about all those things, because some of them are going to work and some of them are going to change what we do in the clinic in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Other questions? Abraham.
Hello, I'm Ibrahim. I just want to ask the question that I'm an MBS student. I'm going for MBS program. So can somebody also take as elective one of the courses for this program that you are introducing to us, like genetic engineering, for instance? Yeah.
Yes, so some of these courses are offered to other programs because they offer a lot of classes to us. So the ones that you can take if you're not in MSGDA are the Gene 312, which is the programming for the biosciences. So that sort of intro to Python and bioinformatics is open, and the genetic engineering course is open.
All right, that's fine. Grateful. That's fine.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Don't make me call on you.
No, that's all.
If nobody else has a question, I have another one, I guess. What would the likelihood be that this fall 2021 semester is looking to be in person as opposed to online? Or is that kind of still a question mark?
It's still a question. The official announcement has not yet been made. I will say things are trending in the right direction, and if they keep going in that direction, I am hopeful. I think there's a strong sense on the KGI campus that we teach better when we're together. We're doing a great job online, and I think we have all the infrastructure in place now. I am personally getting better at teaching online. But I think one thing I learned from this year is that I miss the sort of other interactions, seeing people in the hallway, seeing people at lunch. And so it's definitely a goal to get back to that. Some classes might actually still stay in the hybrid model, because for a few things, it actually works great to be able to just jump into breakout rooms and then move to like lectures. And especially in the second year, we might have some students who are working like on site at a place where they're doing their capstone. So I would say hybrid education is probably here to stay in some form when it makes sense. But I do know that as a faculty, we're looking forward to getting back together in person. So just keep in touch with the admissions team, and they will have the latest information. And wear your mask and follow all the social distancing, and we can get there.
It's good to hear. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Fortini. I'm Samantha. What would be like your advice for somebody who's kind of on the verge of considering either genetic counseling or this program?
So we've had a lot of students who enter our program because they applied to genetic counseling schools and did not get a place. And I think all of them have ended up appreciating that they were in classes with genetic counselors, but it's a very different pathway. So even amongst our genetic counseling graduates, a third of them work in industry. It's a changing time. So I would say really think about what aspects of the career are the things that are drawing you to it, and ask yourself, is that going to be what the career does in 10 years? Because genetic counseling is changing very rapidly as well. And so if you want to be more on the interpretation side, working on the genomics side, it really does help to have these sort of bioinformatic classes. I love the genetic counseling students too. I'm very good friends with the program director and associate program director of genetic counseling. If I had to go back and I actually knew about genetic counseling when I was an undergrad, who knows what would have happened. But I'm happy doing genomics because I like the investigation side, and it's sort of like a little, detective case every time you get a file, and you can really dive into the sort of mechanism that perhaps you don't get a chance to do on the GC side because you have so much of the just family dynamics and all this, very important. But if you're really interested into the genetic puzzle and the mechanisms of action and how we can detect these in bigger data sets, I think that fits better with the GDA sort of track. In the future, perhaps you could go back to genetic counseling or even go to med school and become a medical geneticist. It really depends on what it is. That's the very interesting part. And I would say a lot of people don't know until you've actually done some bioinformatics. You don't know if you're going to love it. So that's why I think the summer program's great. We do dip our toe in all of it, and you can see what really is exciting and interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, I was kind of along that line of genetic counseling, and I've applied to some schools too. And then I found this program when you were on that DNA Today podcast. So yeah, and I was looking more into it, and I was like, wow, I wish I would have known about this 2 years ago.
So, I mean, it's exciting time to be in genetics because the whole industry is changing so fast. And what was actionable today is, tenfold what it was just a few years ago. So I think whichever path you go down, it's going to be an exciting career. Any other questions? And kind of as a follow-up to that, our genetic counseling program is quite different in that way that you do get to take all your classes with the GDA students. So I think it helps their program quite a bit too, that you understand what goes into that little report that's sitting in front of you. How did that data come to be? What are the red flags? What you should be worried about? What should you think is going to be offered in a few years? It's a really interesting dynamic having both cohorts of students together for a lot of classes. Any other questions? I see in the chat that Erica put in that you're making a late stage career change. We have several of those students at KGI. So there will be an article about one of our GDA students who has decided to change careers now that her kids are grown up and in college. So
I'll look out for that.
Yes. So there are many non-traditional students at KGI. I think it's great if you bring background knowledge and perspective to a new exciting career. So if you need to get in touch with Tamarisa, let Sharon know, and we could maybe connect you guys by email.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Anything else?
I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat for anybody that has any questions after this session. Feel free to reach out to me or to Dr. Fortini as well. But if you have any admissions questions or would like to be referred to maybe a graduate student that's already in the program and had some questions about their experience, I can refer you as well.
All right, Ibrahim, do you have another question? See your hand back up.
I have this passion as well for genetics and data analytics. So I'm already registered as an MBA student. How do I reconcile that? I know I really like genetics and data analytics, but my desire also for bioprocessing is still much relevant and alive. How do I reconcile MBS with genetic data analytics?
Well, I mean, they're very distinct yet overlapping questions. So if you're more interested in the part about making the product get to consumers and get to clinics, the MBS is a great choice because you do get to take the concept and talk about how it becomes an actual product that makes it into clinic. And especially if the bioprocessing, for those of you who don't know, bioprocessing is where you use cells to make things like Herceptin and like antibody drugs, stuff like that. Of course, it's very important to make those safely and efficiently and be able to screen them. And so I think, all of these fields use genetics. There's nothing in biotech or biology at all that doesn't have an aspect of genetics today, just because we have the data to look at every effect from the DNA sequence through the protein action through what's happening in cells. And so no matter what you do with bioprocessing, you're going to have to know some genetics. With MBS, no matter what company you work at, they're going to have some aspect that has genetics. The real question is, do you want to be the person doing the actual genetic analysis, or do you want to use that information to make the product safe and get it into
Yeah, I think I would just need to use the information to make genetic products, not actually being the one who use the genetics and goes into the transcription and translational processes. Just the information. That would be okay.
Well,
Right,
it sounds like you found the right program.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Yeah, I did.
All right, any other questions? Okay, well, as Sharon said, feel free to send me an email if you have any questions. And if I don't respond, send me another one. I do get, I've seen a number of emails every day. So if I don't reply, it's because it has slipped through cracks. So I'm not offended if you email back. I will definitely respond once I realize I missed something. And any questions about admissions or the process, please reach out to the team at KGI. They're fantastic and they will help you get everything sorted out and organized.
Thank you everyone for joining us. I really do appreciate. Thank you so much for the information, Dr. Fortini. It was very helpful. I look forward to seeing everyone's application. Don't forget, we still have summer programs that are open to apply. If you are interested in applying, there is a fee waiver that I have available for you. It's just my first name. And this is for the summer programs specifically. It's my first name, capital S, and then the rest is lowercase, and that will waive your $20 application fee. But other than that, the program is entirely free. It's a great program. There are other summer opportunities available as well, so be sure to take a look at that. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. But thank you again so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Fortini.
Yeah, great to meet everybody today.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.